Welcome to the Liberating Effect, the podcast with Rabbi Mendy Greenberg, Isaac Smoldon, and the book Letters for Life that we are discussing. This is episode number 6, and welcome, both of you.
Yes,
Thank
very
you.
good to see Rabbi Mendy again. Now that
great to be back.
His
After
busy
holy days
season
are
is
over.
over. Yes, yes.
Back to real life.
Very good.
It could feel. I can relate to that a little bit. I mean, any time you have a busy season, a holiday season, or for me, just a hockey season, October, November, just every weekend doing something, doesn't matter what it is that can. But now that I say that, now that I was about to go on this segue about it can just feel so stressful. Isn't that kind of what this chapter is about? is serving joyfully, even in those moments. So maybe
Not
it's the
being a
perfect
whiner.
time. Maybe it's the perfect time to talk about this.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Yeah.
it's right. The in Judaism, the big holiday season, it's 4, as I said, I think in our last podcast, it's 4 holidays, literally back to back, within a period of 3.5, 4 weeks, 4 major holidays. The first part is more a serious reflection, repentance, and then the second part is much more joyous, and the peak is with a lot of joy, and it's kind of someone just asked me outside over there, like, how was it? So I said it's actually a great way to plunge into the winter, to the dark, to the cold, getting that boost of energy. And kind of the holidays is, when I said real life, there's a certain truth to that. In other words, that the holidays kind of take you to a higher place spiritually, but it's not. It's kind of almost like a different realm. You're almost not in the regular world, the regular space that we are in, and it's a positive thing, that we are able to go transcend and go to a higher place. But ultimately, that's not the regular place where we are on a day-to-day basis. And the idea is to take all that energy, to take all that inspiration from that mega 4 weeks, 3 weeks of high energy, and bring that into throughout the year, be able to tackle the winter months with more strength, with more joy, with more warmth, and that's really what this next chapter is about. We started, the first part of the book was about just in general. The Rebbe's perspective is always regarding physical health and emotional health, was to first talk about, or at the same time that we have to deal with issues, to deal with preventative measures. It's not enough to wait for the problem to come and then look for a cure, but how do we help people never get sick in the first place? And that's on a very medical, basic, physical level, and also on a spiritual, emotional, mental level. Not to wait till we have a problem, but to track the problems, or to help the person be always healthy, that they never get to these problems. So therefore, this book, the first part is basically healthy mindset, which is really good for everyone, right? Whether we're doing great or whether we're not, but what's the right mindset to have, to be optimistic, to be upbeat, to how to use out ourselves, how to express ourselves the best, and how to live a good and meaningful life. The second part, which this really reflects on this time now, when it gets dark, it gets cold, when we actually deal with problems, when we are depressed, when we have anxiety, when we are critical about ourselves, and on and on and on. How do we deal with those things? How do we deal with those issues head on? And that's what that's what we're discussing today.
Preventative medicine is what it talks about at the start of kind of this section, this overcoming darkness section. And again, like you said, with us being up here, how important is it for us to learn how to overcome darkness when we're about to get 4 hours of sunlight? Even before chapter 6, there's the letter that is written to a young woman, and the synopsis at the end, the part to ponder on, is our emotions can seem beyond our control. And I was having this conversation the other day because the Mariners just lost yesterday. And it was very, very emotionally taxing for me and my family, not in like a serious life kind of way, but we invested a lot of time and energy and, love into this baseball team that does not love us back. And and on a serious note, it has led to a conversation with my family and our friends that we had come over about, if I'm walking around work yesterday, which I was all stressed out because the Mariners were playing Game 7, who knows what was going to happen. I have made an effort to, even when I am feeling not in control of my emotions, acknowledge the fact that I am allowing myself to be distracted. I am allowing myself to be angry. I am allowing myself to let this outside stimuli that I have no control over, that if I wanted to, it wouldn't affect my life at all. I am allowing it to dictate my emotions. And that is kind of in, a silly way. It's a baseball team, it's sports. But I think that can be applied to much more serious things, obviously. That's what this chapter, I think, really dives into, is we cannot control what happens in the world. We cannot control what happens to us. We cannot control what other people do. But what we can control is our response to it. We can control what we think, say, and do. And there is a lot of power that comes with that ownership, which is an idea that I think we've talked about a lot so far in the course of these discussions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's and that's what the first thing over here was about, how from one hand that the idea is not to suppress our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
On the contrary, we're meant to have emotions, but the emotion should be controlled and ruled by the mind. Sometimes I think people don't think that way. Think that let our emotions go free and let them feel or dictate how things should be, and that's not a very safe and a very effective way of living, and it's definitely not going to bring us happiness. We have to choose. We have to intentionally choose a certain direction and guide our heart and guide our emotions to a certain place. And as you said so beautifully, we can't choose what happens to us. We can't choose what happens in the world. It's out of our control. But the question is, how are we going to react to that? How are we going to feel about that? What are we going to focus on? And that's up to us. And it goes into the next section, the next piece, which is in Jewish mysticism. It talks about that everything in this world is a mixture of good and bad. There's nothing that's only good, and there's nothing only bad. I mean, there are good things, but in every aspect of our life, there's a mixture. There's some good. There's no person that lives only a perfect life. There's always going to be bad things that happen in their world, or happen at least till the time of redemption, when the world is fully refined and becomes perfect and good again. There's always good and evil mixed, and the question is basically, how are we going to react to that? Are we going to choose to focus on and put the spotlight on all the bad things that happen to us, all the bad things that happen in the world, or are we going to choose the positive things? And it's a choice for each one of us that we can make, and every day, at every moment of our life. What are we going to focus on? And clearly, we could all choose to focus on the positive, and we'll be much happier, or focus on the negative, and we'll be sad and depressed. And so that's a very powerful thing to know, that it's really in our hands. And one of the examples is that, there are people that could live, you look at the paper and, on paper, and you see what their accomplishments in life are, what happened, what type of family they have, their health, everything about their life. And it seems like things are pretty good, but yet there's plenty of things in their life that make them sad, because everyone has things in our life that can make us sad. And yet you have people that seemingly went through much harder things in life, much greater challenges in life, and you look at them and they could be happy and upbeat, positive people. And you're like, well, didn't you suffer more than that person? And the answer is, they're choosing, the person who's suffering more, choosing to focus on the positive and seeing the good in things, whereas the person who suffered seemingly less is choosing to focus on the negative things. And it's not like they have no negative things in life. It's not like they're making things up. But the question is, what are you going to choose to focus on?
Yeah, and just really quickly to add on to that, it's really where you start from. If you're coming into any situation by choosing to you're feeling gratitude, you're feeling blessed, you're looking for the positives, then it doesn't matter what happens, you're already going to be looking at it through that lens. And it's not so much, like you said, again, denying the emotions that are frustrating or make you sad or mad and angry. It's acknowledging it, but not allowing it to control you.
Right.
I really like the statement on page 113. It says, it can be easy to get caught in thinking that being down or bitter carries some kind of virtue. And we might tell ourselves that being pessimistic is a sign of a superior character. And I know people who are critical. They really can be brutally critical of others and condemning and complaining. And I think they see that as a sign of intellect, high intellect, or somehow a superior character. And if you're somebody who sees things positively, I perceive that sometimes as a weakness, and I want to go away from that. It doesn't feel healthy to me necessarily. And I just experienced this in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, Ozzy and I recorded a Motivational Monday, and I talked about grief, and that at the end of whenever there's an ending, there's a new beginning, and that what I recently experienced was the end of my married life and the beginning of being a widow. And I had a personal message on Facebook from someone who said, I don't understand how you're doing grief. It seems like you're skipping over things or that you don't care. And
Wow.
I said, I think that you're perceiving something that isn't real. The truth is that I care very deeply, but spiritually, first, I believe that I will see him again. Second, I believe that his spirit is with me and that he is watching over me and knows I'm living my life to honor the life that we had together. And I have a very different perspective than what you're applying to this situation, but it was really a stark contrast of, do you think about this as positive in a way, ways that you can think about it to move forward, or do you think about it in ways that keep you in that darkness?
Right.
And I'm a positive person to begin with. I don't like living in that shade or the shadow. But this was really resounding today when I read it, thinking like, wow, that's so true. And it talks about the Torah, and that the Torah teaches to joyful, to,
It says in Psalms, serve God with joy.
Serve God with joy, yes. And I think everything we do should be serving God in some way. We're serving one another and caring for our people and the earth. And I just really, there are so many things about this and it also doesn't mean that you don't have times of deep, deep sadness and grief. Right. You just don't stay there. Mm-hmm. Right. You feel it and let it go, and feel it and let it go. And it talks about that a little bit, like the poet, that there are times when the poetry, the Jewish poet, assumes a very dark, perspective, from painful expressions, and then comes out of that saying, but.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's interesting that you bring up that passage, because I had a note about it too, because I was feeling personally convicted about something that I do that I've been trying to work on, thinking that being down or bitter carries some sort of virtue. And I think about myself when people ask how I'm doing, or when I'm at work, or when I'm at home, when I'm out in public, not doing anything, trying to relax. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm so busy all the time. All the time I'm busy, and I have this for work, and I have this work thing, and I have that work thing, and I don't even get a day off this week because I'm doing that work thing. And it some part of me subconsciously thinks that makes me better than someone else that's not working as much, or that it's a sign of a badge of honor.
Right, you're
that
winning.
I'm
winning.
Constantly in a state of perpetual motion and don't have time to stop and reflect on anything. And so I had that lens, and that kind of ties into something else that, that personally I've been working on. If I can share some of my conversations with Richard, our psychologist that comes in to work with the staff, right at the beginning of this chapter, there's a paragraph where it says, we tell ourselves when my situation falls into place, when I get promoted at work, when I have a family of my own, when my kids grow up, then I'll be,
happy.
If
right?
only I,
Yes.
once this happens, then that's going to be great. And you're constantly looking forward to 5 years down the road. And you do that every day of your life. And you're constantly looking 5 years down the road. And meanwhile, like 5 years has come and gone and you didn't have the time to sit in that moment or experience that moment. And there's that study. I don't know if I've shared it on this podcast before. They did a survey of all these folks that were retired in their 70s and 80s. They said, if you could live at any time in your life, if you could go back and stay one age forever, what age would you say? And they're like, 32 to 35. So then they went and surveyed a bunch of 32 to 35-year-olds, like, how are you feeling right now? They're like, we're miserable. This is the worst. We're so stressed. We have all this going on. We don't know how we're going to pay the bills. Our kids are off. We're constantly running them to school and sports and blah, blah, blah. But with the perspective of looking back at those moments, it was like, our family was all together. We had activities that we got to go do with our kids and with our family. We were, our bodies were still in decent shape, and that perspective added a whole new meaning to this time that, when you ask those people in the moment, they're not, they say that they can't possibly, be enjoying anything that's going on right now. And that in the last year, that is something that I have seen in myself and focused on, of trying to appreciate what is going on now. And I think that when you appreciate the moment that you're in now, it is easier to be grateful. You don't let the little stuff affect you as much. It bounces off. And then when, there are major events in your life, you have the emotional capacity to experience those emotions and feel those emotions. And then, like you said, Michelle, let them go. When it's incredible what emotional capacity we have when we're not letting so-and-so said such and such about this thing, or I have to go do this, next week, and I'm all stressed about it. When you let the little stuff go, it's easier to handle the big curveballs.
Yep. Yeah. That's well said. I think that, that idea of never, always looking forward for when I will be happy is just, that's never going to happen. And, you'll say when you're 60, when I was 30 was better. And when you're 30, you're going to say, when I retire, then it's going to be great. But really it's and one of the things we mentioned over here is the idea of having that humility and realizing that the amount of things we take for granted, it is almost like we deserve it, are really gifts. The very fact that we could walk, the very fact that we could see, we could talk, we can move. I mean, all these things. I mean, you think about it. There are people that can't walk. There are people that can't see. There are people that as we speak, they're being their bodies being is blown up or whatever. Different things that happen in the world, and you're like, just the fact that I have healthy feet, that I can walk. I mean, and in Judaism, we start our day every morning with 18 blessings that go through all these basic things. The fact that I could stand upright. The fact we're able to use the restroom. I mean, literally all the basic things. And the purpose of it is to kind of sit back and appreciate just the basics that we take so for granted. It's like, what's a big deal? I could see. Of course I could see. But yeah, so when you look at it from that perspective, the amount of good all of a sudden that accumulates in your life. You're not homeless. You have a house. You have food. You have a car. You have money. Some money in the bank. I mean, all these things. There's so much to be grateful for. There's so much to be appreciative. Doesn't mean that there's nothing missing in our life. Of course, there are things missing in our life. No matter how much we're gonna have, no matter what's gonna be, we're always gonna feel and always be able to see. You go into a building, a beautiful building. You guys are building a building now, so very often. People walk in, guests, and wow, it's so beautiful, and so this and that, and you're like, well, I see over there in the corner, there's a little mess up that they didn't finish over there, and you see this. The people that the people that were involved and invested in building the building, they see every problem in the building. They could point it out to you, and every time they walk in the room, they see all the problems shoot out of them in their face. And when someone that has no idea, they're like, "This is a beautiful place." So it's really, where are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on the little problem that no one knows, or it's that choice you have to make. And one of the things that this chapter says is actually that it's not just a psychological decision. Will I focus on the good over the bad, and then that's obviously going to be better for me. But actually, it's a truer decision. In other words, that good is eternal. Good is the essence of existence, and bad goes away. Bad is not, and we spoke about the idea of loss. We mourn the passing of a loved one. We grieve the passing of a loved one. But what's eternal is the soul, and the soul of the loved one that passed away is eternal, and the relationship we have with that soul of that person who passed away is eternal, and therefore the good that's there, that eternal good, is it's everlasting. That's something to be happy about. That's something to take joy in and pride in. Whereas the physical loss is a terrible tragedy and is a very painful situation. But yet that's not eternal. The lost part is not the eternal part. The pain is not the eternal. What's eternal is the good. So the more we focus on the good, the more we focus on the good things in our life, the things that matter in our life, we're really focusing on what really matters most.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so easy in the present day, and the news does this, right? They focus in on one or two little things that are the negative and draw us away from a lot of the things that are joyful. And to your point, Isaac, I really notice sometimes people moving the goalpost. Like, when I reach this goal, then I'm going to be so happy. And they reach that goal and immediately move the goalpost. So they never get the opportunity to really be happy. Jeff and I had a long journey to having our daughter. We were married 13 years before we had Eliana. And I have girlfriends who would say, "How are you waiting? How are you, how did you wait so long?" And my answer was, well, we're enjoying the time that we have together without children. We're traveling and we're doing a lot of things that are fun, and the focus doesn't have to be just that. That isn't necessarily the only thing, right? There's lots of ways to feel joyful. There's lots of ways to feel success. There are lots of opportunities to have things in your life that enrich it, that maybe are not what you envisioned in the beginning, but you decide what the goalpost is, right? You decide what the focus is. And there's a piece of this chapter that talks about being self-critical. And I noticed that as a theme. Is that a normal theme in the Jewish culture? Because this is not the first time it's come up in the book, and I appreciate that.
I think in general, when there's a lot of expectations, so automatically there's more place for being as we said, the being bitter or being sad could be a virtue, or we think, oh, that's like what Isaac mentioned. The same thing is, someone could feel like, there's such an expectation of me, right, to do so much. So, I'm very critical of myself. I'm not going to lie to myself and say I'm amazing, I'm good. I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to be, take myself very seriously, and which sometimes connects to being very self-critical. Which that is something that the Rebbe is trying to combat and say that just like it's a commandment, a directive of God to be happy, to serve God with joy. That yes, we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to know who we are. We have to know, but yet at the same time, we also have to know our virtues. Just so, in other words, just like we know our shortcomings and we have to fix them and correct them, we also have to know our virtues, and we have to kind of not let our shortcomings take us over, and not say, oh, because I have this shortcoming, that shortcoming, and I messed up this way, messed up that way, so that's all of a sudden defines me. I'm defined by the fact that I'm essentially good, and I do good things. And even sometimes we spoke about here about if someone can make a reflection at the end of the year and say, I did more bad than I did good. So even then, the Rebbe says it's not a reason to be depressed, because the good is eternal, the bad is not eternal, it goes away. So even if someone could say, what do you mean? I have on paper that I did so much more bad. Even if that would be honest and that would be true.
Right.
The good that you did is what really matters. And that's what's really going to impact you and your surrounding. And the bad, you forget about it, you repent for it, and you move on.
I'm laughing because
Nice.
we're doing self-evaluations this month. So we've had these themes coming up. This chapter was really, when I read it, I was just laughing a lot because I felt convicted a lot. And speaking of, messages for future previous versions of yourselves, I wish I could bottle this chapter and fire it in one of those pneumatic bank tubes back to my 17-year-old self. Joy is a calling, serving God with joy. That I think really is the theme and encapsulates a lot in the chapter. But there's a short little bit before the joy is a calling bit. It's titled "Begin with Nothing." Mm-hmm. Humility is a prerequisite for joy. That is something that 17-year-old Isaac really could have benefited from hearing a lot more often than he probably did. And I feel like I need to put it in big, bold letters somewhere in the office so that I can just look at it every day. Humility is a prerequisite for joy. And then that's where the Rebbe talks about the 18 morning blessings and says, in addition, you have been blessed with good health, good parents, good education, a good community, a good profession, livelihood, and more. If so, what is the justification for complaining?
Yeah.
And it's not convicting someone for complaining because complaining is bad, you shouldn't do it. It's saying, here are all the ways that you get to experience joy, that you have been blessed, that you have to be thankful. None of those, you don't have to have any of those. You could have none of those. But here are all the things that have been given to you. If you appreciate them, you will be joyful. And if you are joyful because of that appreciation, you will live differently than if you had failed to recognize those.
Yeah. I'll tell you actually a personal story of my grandfather, my mother's father. He's in his 90s. He's still alive. So he survived. He escaped him and his family escaped communist Russia in the mid 40s. And they went from communist Russia, they went to France, and they were in displaced persons camp. And then they ultimately made it to England and then made it to New York in 1951 to study as a 18-year-old in the Rebbe's yeshiva, just a year after the Rebbe assumed the leadership of Chabad movement. So he was, and those days the Chabad movement was very small. So all the founding students of the Rebbe enjoyed a very, very close personal relationship with the Rebbe. The Rebbe literally raised them like a father, and he married them off and took care of them. Their entire life was guided by him in a very, very intimate way. So he got married in 1958, and he was sent as the Rebbe's emissary to Michigan, and he lives there till today. So when he was a student, he suffered a lot from I wouldn't say depression, but more melancholy. Being hard on himself, very self-critical. I think maybe a lot of it had to do with the experience of living under communist Russia, hiding. Their whole life, they were anyone that was religious from any religion, but the Jewish people in particular, religious Jews had to hide in the most crazy way. The Russians were down their back. The KGB was, if they did any type of religious observance, it was brutal. It was terrible. So then he finally gets out of Russia, and then so just life was hard. It was right after the Holocaust. There was a lot to be sad about. There was a lot to be not in a great up spirit, and the Rebbe kind of. Many people say the Rebbe was God's healing to the Jewish people for after the Holocaust. The Rebbe took right away, and it's not like he didn't suffer from the Holocaust. He came from the same world. He escaped the Holocaust. His brother was killed by the Nazis. His sister-in-law, and on. His grandfather. So it's not like he was he didn't know what was going on. It's not like he came out of nowhere. He came from the same world everyone else did, but yet he had that. And actually, it's mentioned in the book. how the Rebbe writes about Maimonides. Maimonides, one of those great Jewish sages from about 800, 900 years ago, and how he had to run away during the Spanish Inquisition as a 13-year-old child to run away from Spain. And they were going from city to city to city to city till finally they made it to Egypt. And after 2 years living in Egypt, there was a plague, and he lost his father, lost his two of his sons, and maybe an aunt or something else. Anyway, he had every reason in the world to be very, very depressed, and yet he was a very, very upbeat. He chose positivity. He chose optimism. And you see it from his works. He was one of the greatest authors till today in Judaism in so many ways. And same thing was the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe was extremely optimistic, extremely saw the positive in everything, and saw how the world will be a better place. And anyway, so the Rebbe is telling my grandfather that he has to throw his pessimism and to throw his sadness into the ocean. That's what he told him once in a private audience. He has to throw it away into the ocean. And so my grandfather responded and said, what should I be happy about? What's there to be happy about? I guess he was kind of saying, he was being very self-critical. All my spiritual faults and all my shortcomings, there's nothing to be joyous about. Like, what is there to be joyous? And the Rebbe started saying, well, first of all, the fact that you have the parents you have. Second of all, the fact that there was a few things. He listed off a few things, and then the Rebbe said the fact that you're here, because he definitely appreciated the fact that the Rebbe wasn't he appreciated that he was in the Rebbe's presence and the Rebbe was raising him. He's like, just the fact that you're right now sitting in this office, that there's many people that are not here. So just the fact that you're here. Anyway, the point was the Rebbe went through a list of things that he should be happy about. So it was something that the Rebbe dealt with a lot of people, to realize their blessings and to appreciate their blessings, and to not focus always on what you don't have and what the problems are, but to focus on the positive, and to throw away that version of thinking that it's virtuous to be pessimistic and to be critical, but on the contrary, to see the positive in things.
I love that story, and I think there's a lesson there for trauma survivors. We have so many people that are trauma survivors in our building, and there's really, I think in recovering from trauma, there's really two ways that you can do that. There isn't a lot of in between. You can focus on the trauma and define your entire life around that, or you can focus on the healing and define your life around that. And I really felt that in this chapter, that there's really some very specific instructions for focusing away from the Holocaust, focusing away from what I'm not getting, or what I don't have, or what isn't happening right now the way I want it to. And I think he even says to make your mind go where you want it to go. And yes. I really appreciated that. It's not only am I living that almost every day, where, especially working the way that I do, just making your mind go where you want it to go. You still have to deal with heavy emotions and grief, but you don't stay there, and you don't focus on the experience as much as you focus on the recovery. And I really feel like that should be part of the teaching for trauma recovery. The aspect of historical trauma, that we keep that as a foothold, and not that in reference to the Jewish people and the Holocaust, we should forget that, certainly not. But I really appreciate how he talks about that, and that you know that happened. Some people were there. Your grandfather experienced communist Russia, but that isn't where his mind lives. Right. And that's so,
or where it shouldn't live.
Yeah, it isn't. It's so powerful to me. There's so much self-control. There's so much discipline, and there's so much more joy in doing that than I think the default sometimes is the negative, right? Yeah.
Actually, I think someone said something very positive, something very revolutionary. I think that so many times you wouldn't think that discipline and self-control would bring to happiness.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is, in other words, you think happiness should just come easy. I should lay on the couch and I should be happy.
Yeah.
And on the contrary, you have to work to be happy. You have to, in other words, you have to work on yourself and make a decision and be disciplined and have self-control. Then that will lead you to real happiness.
Yes.
And that's a daily choice to make on a daily basis. Happiness is not free. It doesn't come.
Right.
It's not a free lunch.
Yeah, it doesn't fall out of the sky
Yeah.
and land on you.
Exactly.
And you do have to, especially during difficult times, really discipline your mind to stay where you want to be.
And that's been a piece that has stuck with me from a previous chapter, is that letter that talked about, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling like all you want to do is just stay in one place and lay in bed and that'll make you feel better, it won't. Go out, do something, give back, and then you will feel better as a result.
That's
if
right.
you're just willing to push through it just for a second and get out there and be able to give.
Help other people.
And this chapter has been very focused on the present and how we can control our emotions in the present and focus on the present, which I think segues very nicely into, and even just that conversation right there segues very nicely into our next chapter. And now that we know how to stay in the present, we can focus on not worrying about the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Chapter 7, next time, tune in. It's going to be about worry, how to manage worry. And thank you so much, Rabbi Mendy, for joining us. I really love these discussions and just talking about the different aspects of life. This is like real life, right? Thank you, Isaac. Ozzy Keener, this is recorded in the My House studio. Ozzy Keener is our editor and producer. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.